Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity to share some ideas with you this morning. My name is Louise Hayward, and I am currently convening the independent review of qualifications and assessment in Scotland. And previously, I was Professor of Education Assessment and Innovation at the University of Glasgow. I'm really sorry not to be with you, but I can assure you that Professor Muir has kept geography at the forefront of all of our thinking throughout the review, and that Ken, as a member of the independent review group, will feed back ideas that you have to that group. But if there's anything else that you'd like to comment on, please don't keep good ideas to yourself, and I've left my email address below. The review in summary then. This is a look to the future. It's really quite frightening to recognise that young people being born now will still be working at the turn of the century. So in looking at this review, we have to do two things. We have to look to the future and learn from our own past and from experiences internationally. We understand much more now than we did 20 years ago that change is complex, and that any proposal for change has to pay attention in an integrated way to the why change, then the what, the how, and when. But why has to remain crucial throughout our thinking. And it's not difficult to identify why we have to change. The emerging context, the pace of change is ever increasing. 3 months ago, ChatGPT was almost unheard of. Now it's everywhere. And our current system has served us well in many ways. But we need to think about how we ensure that Scotland will remain well served in the future as the pace of change increases. We also need to ask questions about what our own appetite for change is and what pace of change is most likely to lead to the best outcomes for learners and for Scottish society. Deloitte recently described what's coming as the industrial revolution for human intellect, and I think that gives us an idea of the scale of change we're looking at. The review itself is based on a model of change that is called Changing with Integrity, and it's a model that was developed from empirical evidence arising from, some of you may remember, the Assessment for Learning programme, which was perceived to have made a significant difference to both policy and practice, and it used research as a driving force for that. In his report, Professor Muir made reference to the fact that Scotland needs to be engaged in cultural change, and cultural change means that everyone has to change. So within this model, there are 3 areas that the review pays attention to. The first is that for people to want to change, they have to be convinced that the change has educational integrity. In the context of the independent review, that means better educational outcomes for all. And to do that, we developed a clear and shared vision of what the future might look like. And that was developed originally in partnership with the Scottish Youth Parliament and the Children's Parliament. The second area we have to pay attention to is personal and professional integrity. So everyone who has a role to play in the success of the initiative has to be involved in its design and development. And I'll say a little more about how we've tried to do that within this review. The third area we need to pay attention to is the systemic integrity. And that's just like the back of an old-fashioned watch. Then all of the little cogs have to be moving and turning in the same direction. So we need to look beyond qualifications itself to the other areas of the education system that will have an impact on whether or not a new approach to qualifications embeds well within the system. So we need to pay attention to accountability, teacher education, professional standards, inspection, a whole range of different areas that will have an impact. If any of you are interested, then there are papers on the model available on the OECD website. The structure then of the review, at the centre of the review process is the independent review group. And that comprises people from 3 different communities, and also from a 4th community who have a slightly different role to play. So on one side of the matrix then, we have those for whom qualifications matter most, and that's learners and, as appropriate, their parents or carers. The second group are those who are involved in the design, development, or those who offer qualifications. So teachers in classrooms, head teachers, through to national agencies. The third group are those who use qualifications. So the colleges, the employers, the universities, the voluntary sector. And on the other side of the matrix, we have researchers from international contexts who advise us as an independent review group on key issues. And the key issues that we've identified are equity, the processes of change itself and what has to happen post the publication of the report, curriculum, assessment, and policy, how we bring all of the different parts of policy into alignment. Key features of the review are that it's led by learners, that we seek wherever possible to include seldom heard voices, and people who work with me on the independent review group have been asked to join that group as individuals who link with particular communities, broadly defined, not as individuals who represent particular organisations. The review then itself is organised in 3 phases. The first phase is to develop a shared vision and principles that will be used both as the basis for the design of qualifications and also over time to go back to as a kind of touchstone to investigate the extent to which what's developing in practice remains consistent with the original ideas. We then use the vision and principles to explore options for the future of assessment and qualifications in phase 2. We then gather information on these options, and that's then used as an evidence source for phase 3, where we develop what we're describing as what looks like the preferred option. And then we ask questions around our interpretation of that. Have we interpreted people's views appropriately? And centrally, what are the practical implications of the preferred model in the short, medium, and longer term? And what support is likely to be needed for its enactment? So the process has gone so far so good. The IRG and the CCGs have met regularly. I really want to say thank you to all of the people who've been involved in the process. We reckon more than 400 individuals who are involved in regular CCG discussions, and these are detailed, informed discussions. We sent materials out to every school and college in the country. There has been a public consultation, wide range of meetings with different groups and organisations. And we've also been working with researchers and policymakers internationally. I've given a list of some of the countries we've been working with, but in general terms, we've identified countries within the OECD framework who are recognised as both being high achieving and high in terms of equity, countries in particular who have similar aspirations to our own. So phase 1 then, the vision and principles, as I've said, it's a touchstone both for design development, and it's a framework to be used for a cyclical review to promote good alignment between ideas and practices. So specific update on phase 1. We've had, as you can see, a wide range of responses. In general terms, little challenge to the fundamental ideas in the draft vision statement or the draft principles, but lots of advice on how to simplify the language, sharpen the statements. We've redrafted now the vision and principles, but we recognise that we'll continue to redraft these throughout the other phases of the review. So the current vision statement is An inclusive and highly regarded qualifications and assessment system that inspires learning, values the diverse achievements of every learner in Scotland, and supports all learners into the next phase of their lives. I've also included there the amended principles that you can look at your leisure. Phase 2 then, we've used the principles and the vision to explore options for the future of qualifications. And we looked for advice from all of the groups that I described earlier on 3 main ideas and 1 central premise. So the 3 ideas were: what evidence should be gathered, re-qualifications, assessment and awards? Are we looking at subjects, skills and competences, contributions to society, wider achievements? What actually is the kind of evidence that we want to gather? The second issue was around how should evidence be gathered? The balance between exams and other forms of assessment, the potential of technology, these were all issues that were part of that discussion. The third area is how should evidence best be presented, and particularly looking there at the potential of technology. But central to everything we do, how should we ensure that qualifications enable all learners, regardless of their circumstances, to demonstrate their strengths and achievements? So feedback from phase 2, again, you can see we had a wide range of approaches to the ways in which we engaged with people. And again, the evidence coming from the various groups was independently analysed. We had over 700 responses to the public consultation, many of these involving significant numbers of people. We've also kept in close contact with the national discussion and the Muir review, and our recommendations will build on those. So responses independently analysed, and they're now being used as to inform a possible future model for assessment and qualifications that we're going to test in the 3rd phase. So what are the key messages? And this really is work in progress that I'm sharing with you just now. But the key messages that we're getting are that there's a general consensus around the fact that qualifications should relate more closely to the broader ideas of curriculum for excellence, as described in the refresh narrative. And I've put the icon there to let you see. There's also a desire to explore an overarching qualification or a kind of graduation certificate that would allow for the building of credit and would bring together different forms of learning. So within the overarching qualification, and a working title we have just now is Scottish Diploma of Achievement, there would be 3 kinds of evidence. The first would come from subjects or curricular areas. The second we're describing as learning and context. So it's where learners use knowledge from across different areas of the curriculum, and they have opportunities to develop and to demonstrate their skills. So, for example, through an interdisciplinary project. For some learners, it could be on global and local issues. And in that context, we're particularly interested in your own work on climate solutions. For other learners, it could be a more personal challenge, particularly, for example, for children who have for learners who have severe and complex learning difficulties. The third area is a personal pathway. And within that personal pathway, there could be 3 areas of contribution. So the kinds of social contribution, school or wider community or college or caring responsibilities, cultural contribution, so volunteering, engagement in cultural activities broadly defined, music, art, drama, field trips, Gaelic culture, sport, wider cultures. And the third is an economic contribution. So it could be employment or career development, including enterprise or voluntary work. But a way of offering learners an opportunity to develop a broader view of what they would wish to demonstrate to the world as being what they will take with them as they move into the next phase of their lives. And interestingly, these are issues that the users of qualifications are particularly interested in. We're also picking up a wish to explore options to integrate academic and vocational, and we need to test actually how far we're prepared to go with that, potentially using the SCQF framework. There's an interest in the development of a digital learning profile, but recognition of the challenges that are faced around that at present, and a recognition that the system would need to be supported to move towards a new model. Advice on phasing, on a communication strategy, yes, for the profession, but also learners, parents, colleges, universities, employers, looking at the wider system and what would need to change to support, as I described earlier, and then thinking about professional learning models, working with research, policy, and practice together to co-construct the future, rather than having expert groups inform others of how things might be done. So the timeline then, interim report to the Cabinet Secretary by the end of February. We're now moving into phase 3. This is very much work in progress, so please see it in that context. We're going to seek feedback on a preferred model, pardon me, for the future of assessment qualifications. And we'll ask, is this model consistent with our vision and principles? Have we interpreted the consultation findings correctly? And what will it take to make this work in practice? And what are the implications for timelines? So thank you for listening. I look forward to hearing the results of the discussion that you have. And there are areas where I would particularly value your advice. What contributions might geography make to this model in terms of subject, learning and context, and personal pathway? What approaches to assessment might be included in future that would encourage learners to develop the knowledge and skills that are at the heart of what it means to be a geographer? What would you identify as the biggest risks to a model such as this one being proposed, and how might we best address these challenges? And what are the key changes necessary for the system to support new approaches to qualifications and assessment? Thank you so much, and I hope that the rest of your day goes well.